Season 2 of the Black Tech Green Money podcast is brought to you by Lexus. With connected tech, Lexus Safety System Plus 2.5, and luxuriously appointed cabin, the new Lexus IS is all in on style and performance. See how when you experience amazing at your Lexus dealer. Deshaun Amir, CEO and founder at Maven, a technology company that's reshaping salon retail distribution, is talking with our crew about the challenges of being a founder and being a black founder. He drops some free game that more of us should add to our mental rotation.
I think the biggest fear everybody has when deciding to take a leap of faith is that you're gonna fall and that you're gonna fail. Fortunately for me, the fear of failure was not more strong or more powerful than my desire to win. I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to live with the fact that you could fail, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to also know in your mind that if you did fail, you would just get back up again. My advice for black founders is really the same advice for any founder. Stay focused on your mission, and do not give up. You need to learn, but do not give up. And once you decide that you're gonna commit a certain number of years of your life to this thing, you just have to keep going if you believe in it. And that also means that you can't get caught up in your head about things that may be barriers for you, right? So a lot of black founders, I talk to them, I tell them, you have to stop thinking of yourself as a black founder. You're a founder. And yes, you're black, and that's gonna mean something, and certain people are gonna try to get in your way, but that's just one of 10 million things that's gonna get in your way as an entrepreneur. That's what you have to wake up with every single day, is shit in your way. So, I would just say, the dedication and not giving up.
I'm Will Lucas, and this is Black Tech Green Money. I'm gonna introduce you to some of the biggest names, some of the brightest minds, and brilliant ideas. If you're black in building or simply using tech to secure your bag, this podcast is for you. Nash and Will is a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO at Undock, an AI meeting platform built for the future of work. He recently raised a $1.6 million seed round to put some fuel in the tank to grow the business. I asked Nash about how, previous to Undock, he found himself running multiple small businesses at once, and how running those small businesses led him to Undock.
Yeah, the second wave of multiple businesses was running into, because they were all tangentially related. So I was in the telecommunications industry, and there'd be an opportunity. I'm like, well, this business doesn't do it, but it looks easy enough. Looks like there's a lot of money in this. So I'm going to try it. And I ended up starting two businesses. One was a voice over IP company, and the other was an infrastructure company. So literally installing the fiber optic cable that runs to your house.
You believe, as I've read, in the concept of shipping fast and getting your thing out into the wild as quickly as possible. And how
100%.
How important has building in the public eye, making mistakes in public, and iterating in full view, been to the success you've achieved so far?
It's the best forcing function you could have, especially for someone like me who has two major problems with giving things to the world that you're building. I procrastinate, and I'm a perfectionist, right? So that gives me every reason to say this is not ready for consumption yet. So I have songs that I've made 10 years ago or started 10 years ago. And I'm like, nah, that trumpet is not hitting.
Yeah.
Do it again. Do it again. Find another person to play this melody. So doing something in public with public deadlines is huge for me. I've started doing that. You'll see we had an event November 12th. We're having another event February 17th. We're having another event May 12th. So whatever I'm planning, it's going to happen, and it has to happen because it's out in the public eye. So it's a very good forcing function for me to make sure that I keep building and delivering and not waiting for perfection.
So you encourage people to, even if they haven't, told the world the whole thing,
right,
put it out.
Which I have not.
That something is happening on this date.
Yes, I've only given tidbits of the big picture publicly. But like I said, I'm calling it progressive disclosure of what the startup fully is. So I encourage just, even if you start with your friends and your family, just tell them like, hey, I'm working on this. So the next time you speak, you're going to say, hey, Will, how's that thing you're working on going? And that's just more motivation to put it out there for sure.
Do you think that's just for people who have, you know, this idea of it's got to be perfect, or do you encourage anybody, you know, whether or not they going 100 miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour, or if they're just afraid to put it out? Who do you advise that to?
Well, I'll tell you, your idea is definitely not going to be perfect. There's a high likelihood that your idea is going to be wrong and you're going to end up building something else. So that's why you kind of have to just get started. But if you're a person that has a lot of ideas, like I did, at least spend a little bit of time filtering through those ideas and putting some logic and reasoning behind why you think this idea of yours is better than the next idea. There is no excuse to ever work on an idea that isn't your best idea. If you don't think it's your best idea, if you don't think it's your biggest idea, if you don't think it's your thing that's going to get you widespread impact, don't work on that one. Go work on your best idea, period. And that's what I did. It took me almost a year, talking about procrastination and perfectionist, to select which startup I actually wanted to work on. And then when I narrowed it down to two, I launched them, or I registered them both, and was planning to work on them simultaneously until I could make a decision. See, I have that like crippling disorder where I just like, yeah. But I selected Undock, and it was the right decision for sure.
I want to dig in on that because, you know, I think that's a really, really good piece of advice, and, you know, to only work on your best idea. And so I would imagine there's like two groups of people. There's people who they know what that best idea is, and there's people who are trying to figure out what that best idea is. And for those ones that are trying to figure out, I would imagine you would say, well, work on things like you did until you figure out which one is the best idea. How do you know when it's the best idea? Is it because you came up with, oh, this is the one I want to do, or the market told you?
Right. It can be either or. Sometimes you have to go with your gut. But for me, it was almost 50 different ideas and websites that I had started. And for me, it was, which one do I genuinely think can have the biggest impact, the biggest distribution, and then the biggest, you know, financial outcome for myself, and also one that I was excited to work on. It was a big problem for myself, and it was on the back burner for quite some time. And then I'm literally living the experience where like, I need to solve this problem that I have and nothing else exists. That was a moment for me that was like, okay, I need to build something, and I've already had this idea, and now I'm going to execute on that. So yeah, not all of your ideas are good. So I can easily look back at a third of those ideas and say they are holy trash right now.
Is this because you found out later they were trash? How did you go through that process of
distance? So recency bias is something that you deal with in data, but it's also something you deal with yourself. That moment, that initial inciting moment that you come up with any idea, you're like, yeah, that sounds good. Revisit that idea in 6 months and see if you're like, okay, I mean, it's cool, I guess, or maybe somebody might do it. But yeah, giving it some time to marinate is very important.
Talk about the process of building a startup, not specifically Undock, but period, step by step, because if I understand what your opportunity was with Undock was, you know, calendar synchronization is just the first step in a master plan, I would imagine, right?
Correct.
And I read a story about where you came out the gate thinking you could replace all the big boys like Gmail, Slack, you know, Zoom, Trello, you know, immediately. But how important is it for startups to take out chunks on their journey, and as they do the smaller things well, scale from there?
I think that's huge. That's one of the biggest lessons that I learned, because I was stubborn in the beginning. I was like, I know I can build this huge platform that's going to be better than all of them. And one investor reached out to me and was interested, and they said, but you're competing with XYZ before you've even released your product. It's like, do you know how much money you're going to need? Like, this doesn't sound realistic. And I didn't believe him then. I was like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. It took me a good 6 to 9 months before I started to pare down the short-term scope of the product. And you're just limited in capital. You're limited in engineering resources. You're limited in time. You're limited in how well you can solve more than one problem. Like calendaring and scheduling is such a deep, deep, nuanced problem that I could spend the next 10 years if I wanted to building the best scheduling or calendar application if I thought that was the most valuable thing. So it's really, really tough. And this is another thing where if you take a step back from it, so if I would have started and said, hey, here's my big idea, and then started working on it, just take a step back for like a week and talk about the realities of building this giant monolithic app. It wasn't going to happen out of the gate. It was going to take a long, 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 long time. And if I would have actually made that decision to pare it down even 3 months sooner, 2 months sooner, a month sooner, I could be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months further along. So definitely recommend that. We're still building a really big application, but not quite as big just yet.
So how do you advise other entrepreneurs and even yourself looking back in that discipline? Because I would imagine you think, well, if I just build this little nugget, like how does that make progress in the marketplace when people have all these other options?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely just like pure hubris thinking, I got this. No. And I'm hearing from multiple people just like, hey, just shrink it a little bit. Like I was doing email. Email is so hard to build. And there are companies that have spent like Superhumans are a really good email application. They've been building it for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're still improving just email. For me, I guess I probably wouldn't assume most people are just overly confident in their ability to build something like that. They just might think it's a really good idea and someone should do it. And you see that a lot. Like the all-in-one solution is like the first thing founders gravitate to, because like, oh, I have all these problems. What if I build one thing that solves all these problems? And that's usually going to be the wrong solution.
One thing I love that I've read that you said before is, entrepreneurs need to learn how to talk about their business, right?
Yeah.
And that there's a difference between how you talk about your business at a bootstrapping stage, and versus when you're at a fundraising stage. And so let's take this step by step. So how can entrepreneurs at the bootstrapping stage, and even those who don't plan to raise, maybe they're building a lifestyle company, how can they learn to introduce their product or their company to other people who have no idea what they're doing?
Yeah, I'm actually going through a third phase, and I don't want to say recalculating. I'm studying this phase and learning so I can put it down in writing and repeat it later down the line. I'll get into that in a second. But the first thing I think you need to do is have, and I say this to a lot of founders that I meet with, is have something really exciting about what you're building. Even if it's like a sock company or something, have something really, really exciting for you. Exciting way to tell it to your friends, exciting way to tell it to potential customers. It has to be. There's so much noise out there in the world that if your thing isn't exciting, it's never going to take off. So find something exciting about your business. I spent a lot of time in my accelerator working on a one-line description of the company, and that like hurts sometimes. Like, but no, I can't just say all of it in one line, but find something exciting about your business that you can iterate in one line. You can message somebody and say, hey, this is what I'm building. And they're like, oh, really, really, really cool. So that's like the first hurdle. Like, is it something that's exciting for people? And that doesn't always play. Like if you're a climate tech company, that's only going to excite a certain number of people. But if you're building a consumer app or a B2B app, something has to be exciting about what you're building in the early bootstrapping phase. It helps you stay positive about your idea. It helps you attract interest from customers and helps you recruit employees too. I had the easiest time recruiting. I still have a pretty easy time recruiting when we talk about what we're building. So I think that's really important. But when you move into the fundraising stage,
before you get there, so let's talk because it's really interesting when you said, you spent, a lot of time just working on one sentence.
At least 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And it changed and it fluctuated. And at times you get frustrated and you're like, why am I doing this? I think after week 3, I was like, I'm not changing this sentence again. Like, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And ultimately, that one sentence wasn't what turned into business excitement or fundraising, all other stuff, but it was giving you an opportunity to distill what you're working on. If you cannot distill it in one sentence, it's going to be very hard to get people excited.
So is that, and I would imagine then it's every word matters
Yes.
when you're down to one sentence.
Yes. We learned better, fewer words, right? And try to roll some excitement. So actually don't even use the line anymore, but it was a line that worked over and over and over.
Do you remember the
again.
line?
Yeah, it was instantly schedule meetings without ever looking at a calendar, right? And then just wrinkles people's brain like, what do you, wait, how? Instant meeting schedule, no calendar? Tell me more. Every single time. And I was in a cohort with 12 other companies, and when I would give that line, regardless of the audience, room full of investors, potential customers, partners, all the questions, not all, some of the questions, a good chunk of the questions would come to me because it piqued their interest. Like, this is a problem. You stated what the problem was. You told me how fast you're going to do it. And then you gave me this novel way that's just like wrinkling my brain. And I don't like quite understand. I need to figure out what is this? What is this? And I use that over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I did use it like in my demo investor pitch, like as a one-liner to start it. And I also used it in our launch thing. But from like month 4 to month 7, 8, 9, 10, didn't use it at all. But it was like the starting point. It's the kindling.
Yeah.
Right? And I can always refer back to that too.
And did that one line, that 6 weeks that you spent on that one line, how much progress did you make? Like, did you raise your first dollar with that? Like, where did it get you?
No, did not raise the first dollar. It got me a lot of places because the way I was talking about the business going into the accelerator was not great. It was not great, and I was trying to fit a mouthful in and say that this. It gave me again, like good framing and good confidence when I delivered that line, and it was the lead-in for my investment. So when we started doing our presentations to investors, and we had a demo day, like that was the thing that people remembered about that. Well, 2 lines that people remembered about the presentation. So I think it put me in a really good place going into the investment. And if anybody asked, what is it you're working on, which is a common question you get. It's also like an accelerator question. They say, what are you working on? And they always want a 1-sentence answer. That's the answer you give.
And so how much would you estimate that most opportunities are lost because people don't spend that time working on that distillation?
You're losing 90% of people, even just from like the fact that they're no longer going to pay attention to whatever it is coming out of your mouth after that. It's like eyes glazing over, not interested. And there's some people, and this is, again, I was one of those people that you'll ask for like, hey, what is it you're working on? And then their only answer they can give you is like a 5-minute answer. I actually said this for probably a good 6 to 9 months when I started the business. I was like, I can't explain what I'm working on in a couple sentences, but if you give me an hour, I guarantee you're going to want to use the product and invest. And they're like, yeah, but you're not getting an hour here. So it's very, very, very important. It'll change, it'll evolve. It doesn't necessarily matter if that's the one right sentence, but the fact that you're able to distill what you do and make it exciting and interesting in one sentence, you can use that over and over and over. And that's what the accelerator made us do. So whenever we met a new mentor, new potential partner, customer, or investor, like that was the line, and that was the line that was critiqued. So by the end of it, anybody that came in for critiquing just said, yeah, that's good. I'm interested. Tell me more. And that's all you want. Your goal of telling people what your business is or what you're doing is for them to say, tell me more.
Love that.
100%.
Okay, what's different than about the raising stage, about how you talk about your business?
It starts with that ability, and that's something that investors will look at if you have the ability to, succinctly distill what you're working on. But the conversation with investors is not the conversation you have with your friends and your family. It's not the conversation that you eventually ultimately have with customers or already having with customers. They want to know about potential scale, right? They want to know about differentiation in the market. They want to know about your go-to-market, and they want to know that you have deep product insights and know about your industry. And it's not about like listing off a bunch of facts that you read online. It's having a deep understanding of that. And that's one thing, but then you have to learn how to convey that to investors. So we had our first 2 weeks of meetings with investors, and it was like, oh, that's cool. Not for us right now. And we almost considered like backing the truck up and waiting a few months to fundraise. Just kept getting going after it, getting better, refining. We would have like game day breakdowns of our investor calls after the call happened. Like, okay, that answer was terrible. That answer was really long. That answer was irrelevant. That answer was not compelling. You have to be that real with yourself every single time for as long until you start to get that interest, until those conversations start to go well. And that's what we were doing. Breakdown. If you had a 20-minute call or an hour-long call, even if the call went great and they said they were interested, or if they're like, let it keep us in a loop, same thing. Break it down. What went well, what didn't go well. Some people suggest even writing down all the questions that you had, recording all the answers, listening back to that. I didn't do it, that deeply. I have a pretty good memory, and I'm brutal with myself. Like, I'll get off a call, an investor will like smile or say, okay, cool, I get that to an answer. I'll say, that was a terrible answer. That was a terrible answer. You have to be that real with yourself.
Season 2 of the Black Tech Green Money podcast is brought to you by Lexus and the new Lexus IS. With an available track-tuned V6 engine and responsive handling, the new IS went all in to deliver you style and performance. See how when you experience amazing at your Lexus dealer. You rarely get moments like these when you're building something and the world changes overnight, accelerating years into the future you imagined when you thought up the idea. So what's it like to be building for the future and you find suddenly the future is now? Nash speaks on it.
It was wild. Like, in my pitch deck before I started pitching investors, it was essentially the pitch deck to get into an accelerator. I was talking about the future of remote and distributed work. And I'd say, it's coming. It's on the rise. I know it's a small percentage, but it's coming. And when it gets here, it's here to stay. And I had like charts talking about 2027, 2025. And then we go to this accelerator. We come out of the accelerator and we start fundraising. And we're in the middle of a pandemic where everyone is literally forced to work at home. That in and of itself is not enough for market change and correction. The reason it's so poignant and important for us is that it's better. It's just flat out better. It's a better, and it was an eventuality that we were going to get to at some point. There's a reason some people work from home, because it was better for, not for everyone, better for them. And I think 80% of knowledge work can be done remotely. So 80% of the, maybe not the Fortune 500 is not 80% knowledge work, but 80% of knowledge workers will work remotely. That's 50 million people in the United States that can work remotely. That's a third of the workforce right there. But now you're seeing people in other industries figure out how to work remotely. Like, you would never think telemedicine could be a huge market. You would never think remote therapy could be a huge market. You would never think yoga would be a huge market online. But now you're discovering that, hey, I can get the same thing or very similar. Yeah. Maybe even at a better cost, easier distribution for the vendors. I don't have to leave my house. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That is what's going to happen. That is going to be a large percentage of how work, entertainment is consumed and delivered in the future. And it just so happens that we were building a startup with that in mind. And then the pandemic happened.
So how then do you sell the future? Or let me put it this way. So is it then pre-COVID, you are specifically looking for investors who already get that this is coming, like a freight train, or are you trying to convince people, like, look, this is happening, and then you come out with your data, and then you got your PowerPoint, right?
Oh no, there's definitely convincing. I can tell you, we got into this accelerator. We got investment from this accelerator on the premise that we're building software that's for scheduling meetings and hosting meetings, which is good for anyone, but particularly for remote and distributed teams was our premise, right?
Yeah.
We heard from people within the accelerator early on before the pandemic. We would bring up the remote aspect and distribute aspect. They would say, I don't buy that. It's a very small segment of the market. I'm like, I know today, right? But just compare the two experiences. It's going to come. It's going to happen in some large percentage, not 100%, but 50%, 60%. Even if it was 20%, you're talking about taking a market and quadrupling it in the next 2 years or something.
Yeah.
Even if it was 20%, right? It's going to be much, much, much larger than that now that people have experienced it. And I thought it would take 100 years to get to the place where it's just normal because it's better. And I'm an efficiency guy. It's more if I don't have to commute.
Yeah.
3-4 days out of the week. Why? Right. So yeah, there was still so we had people that believed in the product, didn't necessarily believe that remote and distributed work was the future or that it was anywhere near close to happening. You probably have same skeptics on the self-driving, which is proven to be true. They'll say, self-driving cars are 2 to 3 years away. And then you have a skeptic saying, yeah, you're 10, 15 years away from that being a reality. And that just keeps happening. And it will keep happening until somebody says, we're going to have a self-driving car in 2 years. And then detractor is going to say, you won't for 10 years. And then 2 years later, self-driving cars are on the road.
Yeah.
That's what's happening for us right now with remote work.
And so what are some of those keys you learned about selling the future to people who might be skeptics early that other people can apply to their journey?
I'm still learning, and it's a challenge to sell people on things that they either don't believe or haven't experienced or think it's a far, far, far away future, right? And I think going back to building excitement, number one, is very, very important. Then also give them something that's familiar to them, like build a bridge to the eventuality of it. Like right now on my website, and I do this intentionally, I don't talk about remote work. I don't talk about distributed work. I talk about you have a problem scheduling meetings.
Yeah.
Here's a calendar application that's going to help you with that. But they don't realize, and they will in the next 4 months when we have our big unveil, what part of the movement they're joining. But right now for us, we do focus on what we call innovators and early adopters. Those are people that are willing to use this type of product. They're using something similar already, or they know they have a problem and they're willing to try anything to solve it. And you need to focus on that segment for as long as humanly possible. So again, even if you're selling like socks, don't go to Miami as your first market and try to convince them that socks help protect your feet for whatever reason, because that's not the person you want to talk to. Go to like Minnesota or Alaska and sell your socks, right? Shout out to socks companies.
Season 2 of the Black Tech Green Money podcast is brought to you by Lexus, who goes all in to craft a perfect package of style and performance with the new Lexus IS. A well-appointed cabin and available track-tuned V6 help make the new IS the luxury sports sedan. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer. Our counterparts, our non-melanated friends, don't have as much trouble raising $1 million plus as we do. And so many of us get stuck at raising nothing, or getting a $20,000 check, or maybe a $500,000 seed round. Now, as you've come through this recently, successfully, raising your 1.6 million, walk me through the process you activated to get that million plus that you find other people get stuck at.
I'm always clear when I say this. I did not run a process, and I don't have the best of advice for garnering interest from investors. I can give you advice about talking to them, but my process was essentially, hey, I'm working on this really cool thing and it's super futuristic and like it works and it's awesome. Here's a picture. Look at it, right? And then the investment interest just that cup. Let me rephrase that, because this is something you can replicate. challenging. I did put out, again, a very compelling framing of my business on video, right? And I also took time to make sure that my pitch deck looked very, very good. So when I had investors see my pitch deck before, like very early on, and say, this looks like a Series A, Series B pitch deck in terms of professionalism, succinctness, messaging. Like, get that stuff right. You already have so many strikes against. Let me rephrase that, because I don't want people thinking they have. You don't have any strikes against you. What you do not have is the benefit of the doubt from anybody that you're about to sit across. So try to remove as much doubt as humanly possible. Be super on point with everything that you're putting in front of them to get in the door initially. Now, the good advice, and this is what I was planning to do, is you're going to struggle, and just face it. So don't compare yourself to the, what do you say, less melanated?
Our non-melanated friends.
Don't compare yourself. Like, going through the accelerator, like, yeah, you're going to probably need to meet, between 50 and 70 investors to raise your round. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to meet between 250 and 300 investors to raise my round. Yeah. So I'm hearing the number, right? I'm multiplying it by 5.
Yeah.
That's how I'm thinking. So I'm putting a list together. I had 3 different buckets of people. I'm like, okay, these people, we're in New York. They're in New York. They're early stage. That's the best connection that I can garner with these people. I'm going to start there, right? And then there's the bigger list of just seed investors. And then I had a smaller list of angel investors that I knew of that I was going to reach out to. So put your list together and then hammer it so hard all at once. If you think your fundraising process is going to take 6 months, 12 months, it may very well take that long. Do all of the work in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. Reach out to do nothing else. Shut off your phone and your email if you have to. Reach out to every single one of those investors in succession. Get in front of as many as humanly possible. Again, have as many meetings in a row as possible, and practice and be honest with yourself. When you have a bad answer, don't show up to the next meeting with that same bad answer. If you have a meeting at 11 a.m. and you felt you did poorly on an answer, and you have another meeting at noon, you should already have a new answer prepared. Yeah. Right. A short. And I don't do this very well in like podcast. Be very short with you don't need to keep explaining it. So if your question is like, why is your product different? Bullet 1, bullet 2, bullet 3, next question. Right. Yeah. So just be ready, be a machine in this, and you will get through it. So I don't want to say that you're disadvantaged or discounted in any way. You do not have the benefit of the doubt, but you can get that from them by showing up prepared.
How did you know 1.6 million was the number you needed? Because did you set out for a rounder number like 1.5 and you got another 100, or you set out for 2 million and you fell short by 400? Like, how did 1.6 happen?
I started off with 750,000. I was convinced to do $1 million because I said that's really not enough for what you want to do, but it was, and it is more than enough. So I set out to raise $1 million, and after getting to about 900,000 like confirmed, it was just a snowball. And this was for me, in my opinion, a factor of showing up prepared. And even I started my first meeting like the last week of May and had a pitch deck. I probably changed my pitch deck 4 or 5 times in 4 or 5 weeks and just kept improving it. But the answers just got so much better, so much sharper, that by the time I got to the end of the process, this is just 5 or 6 weeks later, I got yeses on almost every single meeting. And I had to turn around to my co-founders and say, hey, now we're telling everybody no. We're like, no, I know I set this meeting with you 2 weeks ago, but yeah, the round closed. It's over. It's done. I only needed $1 million. I only planned to raise $1 million. And we ended up I originally stopped at 1.3. So I'm like, this is all we need, more than what we need. But then another investor came in at the last minute. And they were interested early on, but they had to reschedule for like 2 or 3 weeks later. But we ended up squeezing them in. And that's how we got to 1.6. So it was a nice round number, looking for 1 million. But when you have investors that are super interested in the business, that's another thing, that if you have the opportunity and you can choose your investors, and I said this, which was scary, but I'm like, if you're investing in this business because you think it's a scheduling company and should stay a scheduling company because it could be $1 billion business, as Calendly has proven by being a scheduling company, you're investing in the wrong founder. I am not building a scheduling only company. And I want people along for the ride, even at the earliest stages, that are not going to push back on that. And almost all of our investors stayed true to their word on believing in the bigger vision. So, yeah, that was a very, very interesting time. And it just felt bizarre because the tide in the very beginning was, cool. I like what you're working on. Let us know. Keep us in the loop. And the tide after that, towards the end, was, can we write a check? Can we write a check? Can we write a check? I have too much money. And then after you have too much money, they're still saying, either existing investors that were in the round 3 weeks ago for a certain amount saying, can I double that investment? Can I add another check to that investment? And it's a bizarre, I don't know if I'll ever, well, we're experiencing it right now, but after this, I don't know if I'll ever feel to be in that comfortable of a position from a fundraising perspective, because fundraising is hard. And I was fully prepared and had my doubts that we'd be able to raise in 6 months. I was like, oh, we're going through the typical process. If it takes 6 months, I'm going to work twice as hard, but it's going to take me 6 months. And it took, 6 to 8 weeks to get it done.
And you attribute that to pounding out the work in the early days of fundraising.
Yeah. Like I said, my co-founder even suggested, like, let's pause the meetings and pick them up in a couple of months. And I said no. And I also started taking all the calls by myself. I'm like, maybe he's right, maybe he's not. So let's not use both of our time for this. And I just hammered it. You just got to do it. You got to pound through it. Even if you have a successful round and your company is obviously worth every penny that the investors are putting in, you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get more no's than yeses, period. Uber got more no's than yeses. Google got more no's than yeses. Jeff Bezos, probably not. He probably not.
Like, how do you know when you're getting those no's that maybe your email needs to adjust, or maybe this is just the person's wrong? Like, what are you doing to iterate on your reach out?
Well, I didn't have much of a reach out process, but what I did to iterate on the answers, and this, like, I'm studying like the investors' body language. This is all video calls. So I'm studying their body language, their eye rolls, their size, the types of questions that they're asking. For instance, I'll give a very specific example. In the beginning, all of our meetings, the entirety of the meeting was about product. They couldn't even get off of product. They're like, well, what does it do? Well, how does it work? Well, how's it different from that? Are you sure it's different from that? Do people really care about that? Product. I'm like, we're never going to get to investment if all they're doing is talking about this cool tool. They understand the problem so deeply. They're investors. All they do is have meetings. All they do is schedule meetings. So their understanding of it led them down the path of, all right, let's talk about this product. All right. So I'm like, how can we move off of the product and talk about the vision, later on what we're building, talk about the market size, the opportunity, why now, all these things that you need to get an investor on board with before they cut a check. So that was the first major problem that we called out right away. Like, we're only talking about product and comparing it to other products. We're not going to get anywhere with that. So that was, how can I deliberately move it off? And I started taking my answers for product questions and adding pivots to differentiation, to market, to vision on each of those answers. So if somebody asked me, well, why is it different than this? I would say, oh, because of this. And I think that's important because this market is only 5%. This isn't any one of this market. There's only 50 million calendar automation tools, and in 2 years we believe there's going to be 500 million calendar automation. So that was a deliberate pivoting of the way I'm answering a question to get it to talking about the money, the market, the opportunity, the big vision, why it's a great business. So that's an example of iterating. It is tough to iterate on outbound messaging, but if you're not getting any responses, it does not hurt at all to change it. And if you get, and this is also probably not something a lot of people are going to do, But I started asking our investors towards the very end, what interested you about Undock, even before they got to the final check, or where did you discover us? Like, what made you want to reach out? Because I was curious and I want to repeat it. Yeah. So right now in my fundraising, I'm not fundraising. Let me change that. Right now in the investor discussions that I'm having, they're all going so well, like too well, that I'm asking myself, what is it about? So I'm not even resting on the laurel that these conversations are going well. I'm saying, what is it about these conversations that are going well that I can not only replicate, but refine and make it even better and better and better? And I probably sent 300 messages to my co-founders saying, why do you think this is going well? And they're like, oh, it's because you have a great team and great market. I'm like, that's not it. Yeah. Oh, it's because you have a great product. I'm like, those things are all true, but that's not why investors are frothing at the mouth. They've seen companies in the calendaring space. They've seen companies in the future of work or conferencing space. They've definitely seen more accomplished founders than myself. And I'm looking at competitors in the space like, oh, these two guys were at Facebook and they started a calendar company. This guy sold his company to, I'm not going to shout out the company. This guy sold his company to another big company 3 years ago, and now he started a calendaring company, and he's not getting this level of interest. There's something in there about, and I figured it out, by the way, I'm not going to spill the beans, about the way I am positioning and talking about the business, and I did not know what it was, but I had so much curiosity about finding out what that was that I've now been able to write it down, put it into a list, and make sure that every single conversation that I have, I reiterate that.
Yeah, he operationalized it.
Yes, and it's going to be huge. Like I shouldn't say this publicly, but yeah, I had some very good meetings with investors this week, and it led me to like want to figure. And I spent all weekend thinking about it and reading and researching and like digging into mental models and frameworks and trying to figure out which ones that I'm using and why it's resonating with investors. You have to go that deep. You have to. Or if you're a Brad, just write it on a napkin and get your money.
Black Tech Green Money is a production of Blavity Afro Tech. It's produced by Morgan DeBon and me, Will Lucas, with additional production support by Love Beach and Raven Earbor. A special thank you to Micah Davis and Sakara Savanyan, like the wine. Yes, that's his real name. Learn more about my guests and other tech disruptors and innovators at afrotech.com. Go get your money. Peace and love.